Good evening. I would like to talk to you guys about these frightful images that I came across while my travels across the internet to find interesting things to bring to you guys. This came under the caption while I was looking for imagery for another video of real Dogman skull or real werewolf skull, and naturally that piqued my interest. Some of you may have seen this before. I looked around quite a bit for information about this image, and there's another image that goes with it, and the story. And the story is pretty fascinating. I be upfront with you. I have a lot of doubt that this was really authentic in what they say, but nonetheless, it's a pretty interesting find or prop or whatever it is. And I figured I would share it with you folks tonight. And you guys can give me your comments down in the comment section on what you think's going on here, or if it's a truth or a half truth or completely bogus. But I wanted to share it with you guys. Now, most of the information I found on the internet was in Bulgarian because it was found in Bulgaria, which is an Eastern European country, and most of it was pretty interesting. I guess this farmer was out in a field and he uncovered a box or came across a box. There's different translations from what exactly happened and different interpretations of that translation, but the gist of it is a farmer was out there. He uncovered this box. The box had a skull in it, a very odd skull, and the writing on the inside says careful vampire skull or careful werewolf skull, depending on the translation. And it was wrapped in chains, and he was like, well, what's this box full of chains? He thought he got treasure. Now, some of the stories I've read said it was buried, and some of it said it was just sitting out in the field. I don't know. It looks like a pretty clean box for something that was buried, which is kind of the first thing. If it was a lot dirtier or beat up or half rotten, uh, but the skull itself is, if it's a prop, it's a pretty scary prop. We're going to go into that in a little bit here in a minute. But I just wanted to share the story with you before we start dissecting what's going on. So Farmer got it, and I guess there was some reporter there talking about the Kosovo War and the Bulgarian War and covering World War II stuff, and he came across a farmer who had this story and wanted to show him, and I guess they took these pictures and out came the story. So for you guys, I had to kind of look it up. I knew Bulgaria was a country, and I knew it was in the Eastern Europe, kind of in the Middle East area, somewhere in there, kind of in the. I knew it was around Greece somewhere, the Anatolian area. But what struck me is I kind of forgot is how close it is to Romania. And Romania, as you know, is Transylvania, werewolves, vampires, all that kind of crazy stuff. There's a long history of all that kind of evil paranormal happenings. So I found that kind of interesting. And the other thing in doing some research for this project is I guess Bulgaria does have wolves, like we'll get into here in a second. Really pretty pictures, by the way. I found Bulgarian wolves look quite nice. I guess it gets quite cold there in some of the more mountainous regions, as you can imagine. And what I also found interesting in their culture is that they have a big problem with these wolves. I guess they have, small villages and small towns and bigger cities. But I guess in a lot of these small, more rural farming communities and villages, they have a problem with these wolves, not only taking livestock, but harassing people and chasing people around. So I thought that was kind of interesting to where if they saw something that was maybe out of the ordinary, that they would classify it as a wolf or as a werewolf, which is in their culture. Which, I mean, a lot of people I know who haven't heard of Dogman, and you describe, oh yeah, it's a 7, 8, 9, 10 foot tall dog-like creature that stands up. They go, you mean like a werewolf? I'm like, well, a werewolf traditionally is something that transforms from a man into like a half wolf, half man-like creature, or in some cases transforms into a four-legged quadruped wolf, depending on the translations and the story you follow. So I find that pretty interesting that they do have a pretty rich history of wolves. They have a lot of them and they're a problem. So I could kind of see how that could work into the story. So let's take a look at a few possibilities and what these things might be. So one of the things that struck me, and in reading stories on other websites that covered this back in 2014, I guess it's been out a while. So if you guys have already seen this, sorry for wasting your time. But here's kind of my take on it. Is someone said it looked a lot like a baboon skull, which I kind of had to agree upon glance. Yeah, it did look a lot like a baboon skull, which is an ape species that has a protruding snout like a dog. So if you want to think of, you know, one of the great ape species is humans, so you kind of want to think of what's the cross between a human and a dog. It might be something like a baboon or like a gugwe. We talked about gugwe Bigfoots here. So this is a female baboon skull, like it says. I noticed they have smaller teeth and less of a sagittal crest, less of a mound on their head. Now here's a male baboon skull, and it's got some pretty wicked teeth, by the way. I always knew they had wicked teeth, but when you see it kind of unskinned there, it really kind of shows you what's going on. But the skull structure, the kind of round hole in the center, the protruding snout, the kind of underbite thing going on, the eye sockets in the place, the concave, I don't know all the technical terms, on the side of the skull, and then finally the male one has a little more of a sagittal crest, which I thought was pretty much in line to what this skull that they're taming. And it looks like the skull in the picture still has some hair and a little bit of stuff stuck to it, so I don't think it could be that old. If it was buried for a long time, that box would probably be rotted away. So I was actually at the zoo the other day, San Diego Zoo, marvelous place, by the way. And they have a whole new Africa Rocks exhibit, and they had baboons there, and they have the big male baboons. And my daughter was cranky, so I didn't have time to take pictures of the big scary male baboons. But a couple of the smaller ones walked by, and I'm like, wow, yeah, it's a pretty good picture, pretty good representation. If I was in the dark and I lived in an area that didn't have these, like I do, like North America or in Bulgaria, and one of these things was chasing me around in the dark, and I just caught glimpses of something on all four, and maybe standing up on its hind legs, looking at me and making weird squawking noises that don't sound like a dog, I would probably maybe think werewolf. So maybe there's something to an escaped baboon, or someone got a baboon skull or a model skull. So the other end of the spectrum is, well, let's take a look at a wolf skull. And as you see on the top there, that's a dire wolf skull, and as you see on the bottom is a dire wolf skull, and the top is a gray wolf. Now, gray wolves are around. Dire wolves went extinct a few thousand years ago. And basically, the really only difference between a dire wolf and a gray wolf is the dire wolf's 20, 30 to 40% bigger and a little bit more robust. And I guess one of the reasons why they went extinct is they hunted exclusively larger game. And when the larger game died out, they had a harder time. Where gray wolves will also eat, mice and rabbits and smaller stuff. So I guess it was kind of their niche. But if you look at the skulls, they're very similar. It's just bigger. And here's kind of a comparison between a dire wolf and a regular wolf. I've seen gray wolves get huge, like, up to 150, 200 pounds, big giant wolves up in Alaska, and the higher north you go. And I can't even imagine a dire wolf's probably on their top ends, probably got even bigger. So I thought it was interesting. I wanted to show you guys what I think a wolf is and what the skulls are. And actually a baboon skull, when you look at it, isn't that far from a wolf skull, which I found kind of surprising. I thought they'd be drastically different, but I know they're completely different creatures and kind of that divergent evolution where two species going off two different directions, but they produced a pretty similar skull, I guess. So also I wanted to point out, and one of the theories about what's going on is those hinges look awful new, and the box looks in really good shape for the bearing story to be correct. Unless this is, 6 months ago and the skull's rotted away to the point where you see it with some hair on it. So I found that quite interesting, which makes me think that something's up here, that either the whole thing is a hoax, or they found this box in an attic but not buried in a farm, or something was lost in translation, or it's a prop for a movie, or something going on. I couldn't find anything out there. I'm sure someone's going to yell at me in the comments about how I'm wrong and this is fake. But something else I found was this picture, supposedly from America somewhere, about a Dogman skull. Now this one I found is interesting. Has an underbite. The teeth and the structure look pretty real, but the hair and the ears, I don't know. I thought this was creepy too, so I figured I would throw this one in there, kind of a comparison. So some of the theories is that, like most things, it could be all 100% hoax or fakes. It could be that this farmer really did find something. It could be the farmer playing a joke on the photographer. It could be that it was found in a barn, or maybe it was buried, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that's why it looks so fresh. Anyway, let me know what you think in your opinion. I thought this whole thing was a little bit fascinating and worth talking about. If you feel I deserve it, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe and ring that bell. And stay safe in the woods, folks.